Okay, our guest is Second Amendment journalist AWR Hawkins. He writes for Breitbart. He's also a professor of history. He's out in Arizona, and I ran into him at GRPC last week in Salt Lake City and asked him if he'd come on the show and talk about what's going on in the Second Amendment world. If you're not familiar with AWR Hawkins, you have to be. His writing is crucial when it comes to Second Amendment activism. AWR, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Mike. Great to be with you, buddy.
Great to be with you. Thank you for all that you do, all the writing you do. You do enormous amounts of volume when it comes to writing about guns, Second Amendment issues, and all the above. What do you think right now is the most important thing for Second Amendment activists? What's the most important story right now?
I think right now the most important story is the movement we're seeing judicially. You have the Supreme Court just decided to take up a case on gun-free zones in Hawaii. You have cases in circuit courts challenging assault weapon bans, quote unquote, and you have a DOJ, for the first time in my memory, a DOJ taking part in some of those cases on behalf of gun owners, arguing against the quote unquote assault weapons bans. And so I think you take those kind of cases and that Supreme Court acceptance of the gun-free zone case, and you take the great successes that Gun Owners of America, the Second Amendment Foundation, the NRA, and others have secured most recently, everything from the engaged in the business rule to other rules that the ATF just put in on their own. We're starting to see those either get nibbled at or thrown away altogether. So I believe what we're seeing happen in the judiciary is the biggest news I'm covering right now.
It is amazing. I think that, a lot of this started because of the Bruen decision, and it feels like this is what we thought was going to happen after the Heller decision. And it didn't quite happen. And then we thought it was going to happen after the McDonald decision, and it didn't quite happen. And it's really picked up steam. And then the Bruen decision just broke it wide open. What kind of feedback do you get from your writing? When you're writing about this, you have more material than ever before to write on. There's so much happening. What kind of feedback do you normally get?
Well, I mean, I get a lot of feedback. People ask different questions, wanting to go a little further with this or a little further with that. And, sometimes I don't go further because I don't want to get into guesswork. But when I can, I talk to them about whatever that deals with the case and whether I think there might be more to come there or whatever. And sometimes people know the application, like in the engaged in the business decision, that judge in that situation, said that rule won't be applied to NRA members. And so, you have different or Second Amendment Foundation members. I can't remember which group it was, but you have to understand when these rulings come down, what is the width of the ruling? What is the application of the ruling? Is it for all Americans? Is it only for the plaintiffs who brought the case? Is it for the plaintiffs and those who helped the plaintiffs? In other words, NRA or Firearms Policy Coalition or whoever. And so I'll have follow-ups like that to explain the scope of the ruling. And that's pretty common.
And, a lot of what you're doing, I'll tell you, you probably, I'm sure you remember, you came out to San Diego and you gave a fantastic talk on media. And it was one of the best talks, probably the best talk I've ever seen on media and Second Amendment in general. I really enjoyed it. What do you think the current state of affairs of media is? I mean, you gave that talk maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Or what's your take?
I think it's both, Mike. I think it's the new media like Breitbart and others. I believe that's so much better. And we have so many readers. We're about 90 million readers a month. And,
wow.
The reach is unbelievable. And, but at the same time, those vestiges of the establishment media, I can't figure it out, Mike. I got to be honest. They just keep lying. They keep pushing that same agenda. They keep pushing that same template. It's failed. It's old. It's tired. but they keep pushing it. And when I say they, you know, I mean like a CNN and MSNBC, those kind of outlets. I watch how they frame things. They try their hardest to frame things in a way that make guns look bad or make gun owners look bad, so on and so forth. That's an old game. That's an old game. And I hope they stick with it, because we're beating them at it. We're going to beat them even worse. But so what I would say to you, to answer your question, in many ways, things are much better. But if you just look in isolation at the establishment media, they haven't learned a lesson yet. They're still going down the same path.
I don't really know what would teach them that lesson, to be honest. Do you have
I
thoughts
really
on
don't
that?
either. No, I mean, Trump just won last year and won every swing state. You know, I would have stopped right there and gone, wait, maybe this message isn't working. But no, instead, you look at how they're handling everything, whether you talk about government shutdown, whether you talk about the war in Ukraine, whether you talk about anything, they are still approaching these topics the way they approached them under the Biden administration and during the presidential election of last year. They're still approaching it identical way, using the same language. And I'm just like, these folks don't learn a lesson.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
So, and it is, and they're creating an environment. You know, I think it's interesting that when I hear people complain about media, and it tends to come from folks that are generally on the right side of the political spectrum, they're not asking for more bias. In other words, they're not saying, hey, you need to be biased in the way that I want you to be biased. They're asking for truth. You know, they're asking for at least present both sides of the story and stop with the propaganda, which I don't think that gets enough discussion. The fact that the folks that complain about media aren't asking, hey, reflect my views, you know, say what I want you to say. They're begging for truth, and they're begging for
Right.
you know, just throw it down the center of the plate and give it to us straight so we can make our own decisions.
Right. I mean, and I remember that's what I like about working at Breitbart. I was going to do a reflection. I will. When I remember when I started teaching at the university after I finished my PhD, when I would teach on Ronald Reagan, who I happen to love, but when I would teach on him, I would try not to distort him in any way, even in my favor. I would just teach, and I thought, I'll teach the truth. The truth will teach the kids. And I think at Breitbart, I know that's our goal at Breitbart. We don't want to write opinion pieces, just present the truth, and the truth will teach the readers. And so I agree with everything you just said. And I do believe that's why, going back to the question about the establishment media, it's why they're not trusted, because everyone them into this, they are twisting it. They're twisting it to fit their template. They're twisting it to fit their agenda. Just report it. Just report it and let the truth teach the people. That's what we have to do.
Well, that's one of the things I really enjoy about your writing, is that it's very fact-based. You're not, you're not giving your opinionated opinions or whatever. That was a weird way to say that. You're not giving your opinions. And I think if you look up Breitbart on any of the all sides or PolitiFact or whatever, they'll always say, Breitbart has pants on fire, false articles, and they'll put you in that far right category. But when I read your articles, I'm like, what about this could be considered far right? You're explaining the way a bolt action rifle works, which none of the mainstream media is doing, right? They're just saying, oh, these big, long guns that are, bad. But you're giving facts that are helping people form their own opinions. You're not trying to make them think like you. So I find it really interesting the way that all of those, biased websites will kind of, push Breitbart as this far right, super conservative, lying, media source. And I don't see that at all when I read Breitbart.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. And the thing is, when you cover those facts like you're talking about, you cover how a bolt action rifle works. You don't have to say anything else. Gun control is completely undercut when they see how rudimentary that is. And the reader's smart enough to do that. The reader goes, wait, this isn't a quote unquote assault weapon. This isn't a quote unquote firearm with quote unquote high capacity magazine. I mean, this is grandpa's hunting rifle. It might have been grandpa's World War II military rifle if he was on a lot of flat land and he was in a trench or whatever, but or not a trench, that's World War One. But my point is, these guns, we're talking about technology that's over a century old. But to your point, CNN's not going to do that because they don't understand. They don't know the difference between a Mauser and a Glock 17. They have no idea.
That is true. I've heard so many little snippets. They'll do compilations of news hosts on TV, just straight lying. And I feel for the people who are reporting, because a lot of times they're just reading from a teleprompter. It's not their fault. Whoever is writing the teleprompter words has no idea about guns at all, but all of the times they say automatic weapons and all these things. It's like, well, no, that was a semi-automatic.
It really is bad. I was interviewed once, a reporter for a major news organization that I'm not going to name them because they don't deserve it. But they said, "Hey, we want your expertise. We want you to, talk about terms and that sort of thing." And then, I was all excited, like, hey, they want to get it right. Mm-hmm. So I gave them a bunch of time, and they wrote an article, and they absolutely got all the terminology right, and still bashed the crap out of guns and gun owners and gun ownership. And I thought, they just totally, pulled the rug right out from under me.
Made it a little foolproof for the haters.
Which was, it's just so biased. AWR, you're in Arizona. And you and I saw each other in Salt Lake last week, and we talked briefly about Charlie Kirk. And I wanted to, you told me that it really had an effect on you. And some of the things that we're talking about here, creating an environment, and that sort of thing. I just wanted to see, could you tell us, how did that affect you, or what are your thoughts on that?
I could tell you honestly, I thought about it this morning. It's foreign to me to want to use any kind of weapon, firearm or not, and just take a life in cold blood. I can't wrap my head around that. My friends in law enforcement, both in 3-letter agencies and just beat cops, they all will tell me, they go, the criminal mind, you can't understand it. It's not like us. These people live in a completely different place mentally. And they've always told me that. And I'm still in a place where I can't understand it. And I was thinking about that this morning. Charlie was speaking, and then boom, he was gone. And I may have told you, Mike, I both was shocked and not shocked, because I look at the climate that's been created by the leftist rhetoric. And it's a climate where if you have a brain at all, you're going, something bad is going to happen. This is not good. There's too much pressure. It's boiling. Something's going to happen. This is a pressure cooker. But at the same time, when Charlie was speaking that day, I didn't think, he's going to get shot. And so, it's just a weird thing I can't wrap my mind around. And he and I were friends. We had done, I think, 3 interviews together. I'd been on his show before, and I'd interviewed him for Breitbart. And, of course, I would see him at TPUSA events. We would speak. And, but even apart from that, even if we weren't friends, even if I just knew of him, I think it would have shocked me because, I don't know. I heard somebody say this, so I can't take credit for it. I'm not trying to take credit, but it kind of really was the JFK moment for the generations that are alive right now that weren't alive then. The assassination of JFK, it caused a lot of people to just lose their breath and just sit there and stare at the TV. And I think that's exactly what happened with Charlie. And it's just like, we've got to rein in. We've got to rein in this violent rhetoric, and it's just got to end. Got to be able to exchange ideas. I don't know. I'm sure, Mike, if you and I talk long enough, we disagree on some things, but I don't think we're going to handle it by being violent with one another. I think, we got to get back to the place Ravi Zacharias used to talk about, creating more light than heat. And that's what we need. When we talk, we ought to create more light than heat. And if you get in a conversation with somebody and it's all heat, get out of it. You're wasting your time because no one's exchanging ideas right there. And those are just the things that I was reminded of again in the assassination of Kirk.
On the one hand, I'm very nonpartisan. Fairly nonpartisan. I mean, probably as nonpartisan as a Second Amendment person can get. And I try very hard to be nonpartisan. I criticize Republicans when they do something wrong and praise Democrats when they do something right. But I am unapologetically dealing with the reality that this violence issue, it's not equal. It's coming from the left. Right. And, it's not a matter of, well, gee, both sides have their whatever. It is so unequally, coming from the left that we absolutely have to talk about it. And I don't think that makes me partisan. And I don't think it makes us partisan to acknowledge that the left something needs to, they need to change. They have to change. Right. On the other hand, I wonder if it feels like a turning point, it feels like, or maybe a tipping point is more accurate. It feels like people from a bunch of different circles, have decided, hey, you know what, this is, we got to change. Something has to happen. I have to get more involved. I have to change the way I speak about things. But there's still some legacy problem causers. I was listening to Senator Warren talk about this budget issue, and didn't hesitate to say, hey, it wasn't just simply a budget issue, AWR. It wasn't just a matter of, hey, we're dealing with money and they think we should spend it one way and we think we should spend it another way. It was the Republicans are killing people.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a budget issue. So you still have these folks creating this environment where it's not just a matter of a disagreement, it's a matter of, they're evil, they're vicious and evil. I don't know. Do you think, obviously it's extremely sad and tragic and horrible, but do you feel like it's impacted people to make a positive change going forward? Or do you think we're still at this kind of this fetid stall when it comes to political discussion?
Right. Well, I think it's caused some people who are center or who are right or center right to make some changes, in that I actually believe they've become more vocal. And you see that with the expansion of so many new TPUSA chapters across the country. Mm-hmm. But I'm saddened when what you say, I don't see any change. I don't see the Elizabeth Warrens changing. They keep that tactic going. What people don't understand, to a normal human, what you quoted her as saying, they go, well, that wouldn't impact me. But see, the people who shoot the Charlie Kirks of this world aren't normal. They live their lives in online game rooms and online chat rooms. And when you have this lie being pumped in, Republicans are killing you, Republicans want to kill you, in their ulterior reality, it makes sense. If they're going to kill me, I'll just kill them, and people don't understand. We got some, for lack of a better phrase, we've got some weirdos walking around among us, and they're only a couple of steps away from doing some bad things. And they just need enough Elizabeth Warrens to convince them that it's time to do the bad things, and they'll do them. And so my answer to your question is no, I still don't see enough change, particularly on the left. The left has got to stop with the violent rhetoric, because and with the accusations that make it sound like Republicans are doing violence to people. That's just not it. Like you said, we're talking about a budget. So let's talk about numbers. Let's make an argument. Why is spending money this way better than spending money that way? Let's handle it like that, without me being called a fascist and a Nazi and a killer. And most of the people calling me a fascist couldn't define fascism. If I promised them they'd get $1 million for doing it, they probably couldn't spell it. They definitely couldn't define it.
So you communicate for a living. And you're obviously pro Second Amendment. What do you recommend, or what advice do you have for people who care about the Second Amendment and want to have a positive impact on people who, disagree with them, or maybe people who are real comfortable with calling us fascists and Nazis or whatever. What advice do you have for Second Amendment activists when it comes to communicating in this environment to affect a positive change?
Well, I mean, sometimes I don't know if we can communicate. If you're with somebody, I had a talk with somebody about 6 weeks ago, and it was a woman, and I thought we were just having a regular talk, and she brought up something about a firearm, and she knew I was carrying a gun because someone had told her, but I mean, just carrying concealed, no problem. And she told me how uncomfortable she was that I had a gun with me. And I said, well, you and I have been in this restaurant probably who knows how many times over the last 17 years at the same time. I don't think you were ever worried about it prior to this. I said, this ideology is getting in your mind. Anyway, she starts screaming at me. Trump is a Nazi. Well, I hadn't brought up Donald Trump. I had not mentioned Donald Trump. We were talking strictly Second Amendment, a very rational talk. And what you do in that situation, in my opinion, I just walked away from her. I tapped her on the shoulder. I go, look, it was good talking to you. And I just walk away. And because there's no gain. You're not going to convince that woman of anything. I mean, she was so out of control, not quite screaming at the top of her lungs, but she was at the base of the steps at the top of her lungs. She was pretty loud. And there's nothing you can do there. There's nothing. So I think that's one thing. If you're pro Second Amendment, if you get in there and you realize you're talking to somebody who has no intention of listening, no intention of contrasting ideas and trying to come to the truth, I don't think you waste your time.
Just walk. Go.
When you find those few, now you will find some every now and then. You find some you can talk to. That's a great day. And I think you go into that with the mentality that maybe you're going to learn too. And, that old Indian proverb, when we teach, we learn. And so, you just get in there and you exchange ideas and you try to reach the truth. But if the other party isn't looking for truth, I abandon ship.
Well, I tell you, there's definitely a case to be made that right now is the time to organize people who agree with you rather than try to convince those who don't. It feels like there are too many people. If you're going to choose how to spend your volunteer time, how to spend your advocacy, maybe right now is the time to get folks who are sitting on the sidelines off the sidelines and have them do something productive rather than try to convince the other side that you're right. Maybe that's not where we are in history,
Right.
And there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of organizing that needs to be done. And frankly, in the last couple of weeks since, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there are a lot of people that want to do something effective. And, I saw it at GRPC. It was a wonderful event. Second Amendment Foundation put on a wonderful event. And the most common feedback I heard from others was they wanted more tips on what to do. What are activities? What can they actually do? So I don't know, AWR, maybe that's where we are. Maybe that's where we are in history, and maybe that's what we should be doing is stop debating and arguing with the other side, let them implode, which it seems like they're doing, and just get those who are looking to be productive and do good things and put the right tools in their hands and give them the right training so they can do things the way that America was designed to do things.
Right, I agree. And instead of debating, you can take someone shooting. It's very rare that you take someone shooting that they don't come out of that either wanting to go shooting again or wanting to buy a gun. And so that's another approach.
That's a big advantage we have. I've said that before. It's a lot more fun to learn how to shoot a gun than it is to learn how to ban one. So.
Yes,
Wait, what were you
definitely.
about to say, Dakota? I'm sorry.
When I was a kid, we had a family friend, an older guy, who would debate with me just to teach me how to debate. And he told me that a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And I'm sure a more famous person said that, and he probably was just quoting them. But it was a good reminder and something that I think of a lot. If I have to convince somebody to change their mind, they're going to leave the conversation with the same opinion. Right. And so I try to look at it from the perspective of this person that I'm having this conversation with likely isn't going to change their mind. But maybe the bystanders around the Thanksgiving table, you know, the aunts and uncles who don't have a strong opinion about guns, maybe they observe the entire interaction and think that my side is a little bit more logical. Or, you know, maybe that Facebook thread or that, you know, social media post, people are reading those comments. And I see this on a pretty regular basis here locally in San Diego. If I have a conversation on our local women's Facebook group for the city of San Diego, there's like 35,000 women in there. If somebody says, you know, I was walking my dog and this homeless guy approached me and I was really scared, like, what should I do? If I start bringing up the concept of like, hey, maybe get some self-defense training, get some pepper spray, come shoot with me, like I'll take you to the range, I get DMs because people are afraid to comment and say, oh, I also want to go to the range. So they'll DM me and say, I didn't want to say this out loud, but will you take me to the range too? And so I think we have this environment where people are afraid to even contemplate the idea that shooting could be a good solution for personal protection. And so I don't know. You the point of that, I guess, is you just never know who else you're impacting by having that debate or that conversation with someone whose mind will never be changed.
Right. I agree with you. That's a great example.
It is. And that's another thing is, you know, stand up and be counted. You know, don't be afraid. Don't let this make you afraid, this horrible incident or this environment. Stand up and be counted. You know, now's the time to be proud and be brave. You know, so don't let them don't let things intimidate you. And I got to tell you, we have a stronger community of Second Amendment folks locally and nationally than I have ever seen. So it's amazing. So any parting words, AWR?
No, it's been great to be with you all. I enjoyed the conversation. And I'm like you. I thought the GRPC was phenomenal this year. And I'm glad we saw each other there and glad we did this show together.
Good. Excellent. Where can people read more of your work?
Breitbart.com. They can follow me on X, AWR Hawkins. And that's it. But we keep the fight up together.
Great. Thanks. Don't forget to like and follow gunownersradio.com or go to youtube.com/gunownersradio and tell everybody about us. AWR, thank you for your work. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you. Good to be with y'all.
Take care. Boom.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. That was awesome.
Thank y'all. I got to get in here and type usual stuff.
Okay, my friend.
Have fun.
Thanks for spending the time. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. And check out our website at gunownersradio.com.